Hi, welcome to our Plant Pure Kitchen Live. I'm Kim Campbell, and this is our second show in our Plant Pure Kitchen Live. We did our first one last week, and today we're making Malai Kofta, which is an Indian dish, and I love to share Indian dishes with people because there's so many spices and flavors dancing around here. It's a simple recipe, but it seems a little complicated when you look at the recipe. So there's really two parts to Malai Kofta. It's a gravy. Think of it like a curry tomato gravy with veggie balls. And so it's veggie balls, gravy, and I'm making rice. You can have it with naan bread. You don't even need to have it over a starch. It's so good all by itself. So I talked about this last week, the importance of having everything set up. So if you're cooking with me, I don't go too far ahead of you, and we can troubleshoot if you have issues and problems. This particular recipe is in the Plant Pure Kitchen cookbook on page, and you should have your recipe that we sent you, but it's on page 184, Malai Kofta. It's a great recipe. I love this recipe. It's actually one of our family's favorite recipes. So I'll put this over here. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to make the veggie balls, and then we're going to make the sauce. So I made a few little substitutions, and I know that some of you received a recipe that had a little bit of a mistake. So when we get to that mistake, I'll explain why we have that mistake, but it has to do with sourcing ingredients during the pandemic because sometimes things are a little bit hard to find. So if you have a problem with the recipe because you couldn't find chickpeas or you couldn't find walnuts, please let us know. Nelson's over there asking me questions, so hopefully we can answer and troubleshoot as we go. So I'll start with the food processor. You don't have to have a food processor, but again, the more tools that you have in your kitchen, the easier this whole process will be. It's kind of like if you had a woodworking room and you had power drills and saws. It just makes it so much easier. So I'm going to use my food processor today. You don't need to if you don't want to, but I want to show you how easy it is to use that. So we'll start with chickpeas. Well, actually, before we even go there, I want to talk about flax meal because we're going to make a vegan egg. And you can make a vegan egg 3 different ways. You can make it with flax meal and sorry, I'm wrong camera. You can make it with flax meal and water. You can make it with chia seeds and water, or you can even use the juice in the can of chickpeas. That's called aquafaba, and it's a great egg replacer. So that would probably be the easiest way, but I wanted to show you the flax meal. So you want to get that started, so you're going to put 3 tablespoons of water in your flax meal. And you're going to let it sit. I'm just going to stir it up a little bit. And it's going to get kind of thick and goopy. So we'll just set it aside and let it do its thing. Then we'll take chickpeas, and if you don't have a food processor, you can put them in your big mixing bowl because you should have a big mixing bowl ready to go for your veggie balls. You can mash them in that. If you have a potato masher, you can mash them with a fork. I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to put them right in my food processor.
Hey, Kim.
Yes.
Before you start that, someone had a question about last week's recipe. The pasta was not overcooked, but the leftovers were soggy. And someone else was saying that they think it might be better to cook the pasta separately each time so it doesn't get soggy.
You can do that. I think I answered that email too. She said that the leftovers were soggy. Anytime you make leftover pasta, whether it's lasagna or spaghetti and there's a sauce in it, you know, the pasta's going to absorb the sauce and it's going to get a little bit soggier. Sometimes certain dishes actually get more flavorful, like I like lasagna leftover, but it is a little bit more soggy. So if you know you're going to have a lot left over and you don't want to make it that way, you can make the sauce and then you can make the pasta separate. So in the Plant Pure Nation cookbook, I have a recipe just like that. So, all right, So I put the chickpeas in the food processor, and then I'm going to add the half a cup of walnuts. You can really use any nut you want for this. Again, a lot of things are not available at the supermarket, so you kind of have to make do. Here's where I really cheat. I know it called for breadcrumbs. You can buy whole wheat breadcrumbs already done. They're a little bit more expensive, or you can just use whole wheat bread. I'm using Dave's Killer bread. I'm going to use about 3 slices, so you can break that up and put it right in your food processor, or you can toast it and break it up.
Kim.
Yes.
Our good friend Susan Marsh
Hey, Susan.
says, can we substitute white potatoes for sweet potatoes? Someone in our house doesn't like them, and we know who that is. But can you do
Yes,
that?
You can. In fact, I should have explained this. Malai Kofta, if you go to an Indian restaurant, it's always on the menu, but it is not vegan. It's made with a lot of cream and a lot of butter, but the dumplings, I call them dumplings, they're veggie balls, the kofta, is typically made with white potatoes and farmer's cheese, a soft white cheese that they use in India, and then they add all the spices that I'm going to add to it, and they deep fry them. They dip it in cornstarch and they deep fry them in oil. So I decided, this is my spin, I decided sweet potatoes are really nice because this is kind of a spicy dish, and there's a lot of, it's not really spicy, but it's got a lot of spices in it, and the sweet potatoes kind of soften those spices a little bit, but you could use a white potato for sure. And then, let's see, we have the breadcrumbs, we have the nuts, and then we have the beans. So we're going to put our top on, and I'm going to process those, so it might be a little bit loud, but maybe our tech people can help out with that. You ready? It's going to get a little loud. So the consistency, I mean, obviously you can't turn it into hummus, it's not that wet, but you want to be able to see some of the parts. So you can see that. And I'm going to use my hands, but it's pretty dry. And yeah, you could definitely use white potatoes with that. So we'll put that in the big bowl. This makes a lot of veggie balls. So what Nelson and I did last night is we made veggie patties with it. And they were awesome. So let's put this over here. And then sweet potatoes. You can buy sweet potatoes frozen. They have them in the frozen section at most stores. Right now you might not be able to find them, but one thing I do is I just bake them, and they just come right out of the skin. You can see I just bake them and use them that way. I always keep sweet potatoes cooked in the refrigerator. So it's a cup of sweet potatoes. And then I need to follow my recipe here so I don't miss anything. And then so we've got breadcrumbs, we've got walnuts, chickpeas. We're going to put ginger in here. I found this. I had a hard time finding it at the grocery store. I found it yesterday. This is ginger paste. It's in the produce section of most grocery stores. This is what I like to use because it's just so easy. So we're going to use a tablespoon of ginger paste. You can also do it this way, because I want to show you both ways. You can buy a ginger root, looks like this. You can freeze it. If you don't, I mean, because sometimes it's hard to use it up, so it can go bad. So if you stick it in the freezer, then you can get a microplane like this. And you don't even need to peel this. I know some people do. They take a spoon and they peel it all off, and it comes off pretty easily. But you know what? If it's washed and clean, you can just take your ginger and rub it on the microplane like that. And it does, I will tell you, this smells so good, and it's probably, whenever you do fresh and you're using a microplane, you're really going to get those flavors. So this is probably the best way to go. But I wanted to show you how to make it quick and fast. So then we're going to add a teaspoon of cumin powder. Here's the thing about Indian food. If you're not quite sure, it seems like a lot of spices, just start out half and then increase. The veggie balls, the kofta balls are not super spicy at all. That is garlic powder I'm putting in there. And then gram masala. First time I heard of gram masala was probably, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. And I thought, is it a spice? Is it a paste? What is it? It is a spice blend. It's an Indian spice blend. There's a lot of things in it, and depending on the brand you buy, there's different. It's cumin, it's coriander, it's cardamom, it's nutmeg, it's cinnamon. It's a blend of spices. Yeah. It's not spicy at all. It has a little bit of a floury kind of smell to it, and it's quite strong. So, and then we're going to add a little bit of salt, or not. You don't have to add salt if you don't want to. A little bit of pepper, and then peas, about a cup of peas. I love peas in this recipe because they're really sweet, and they kind of offset. Again, the sweetness offsets the spices. So you want to take some time and really incorporate this well. And we had a lot of kofta balls last night, so we froze them. We ate them and then we froze the rest. And if I weren't on camera, I would probably just use my hands for this. If you don't like peas, you can throw spinach in this. You could probably, I chopped the edamame. Edamame can be really thick. You could put that in there. But you really want to spend some time working it so that you get all those spices incorporated. It makes about, depends on how big your kofta balls are, but I would say it makes about 15 to 18 kofta balls. That's probably good enough. In India, they make this in northern India, which is basically, India is the spice capital of the world, right? And this is considered a very complicated, complex recipe. And if you watch it on YouTube, they cook the spices in oils, and then they grind them, and they cook them in oils, and they blend it and strain it, and it's quite a process. So this is my crazy spastic spin on Malai Kofta, because who wants to spend hours in their kitchen? All right, so that's it. That is your veggie balls. So take your veggie balls and set them aside. Preheat your oven to 400 degrees and get put that over here, get a parchment lined cookie sheet. And when you're cooking without oil, these things are really nice because nothing sticks to it. You don't have to worry about oiling the pan. And if you want to be more environmentally conscious, you can use a silicone mat. And these are nice too. They clean up really well. You can throw them right in the dishwasher. They're great. I use mine quite a bit. Tonight I'm just going to use this. So you're all set to go, but we're not going to build those just yet. So now we're going to build the sauce, because I want the sauce to cook and bubble for like 15 or 20 minutes while the kofta balls are in the oven. So let's talk about what needs to be done before we start the sauce. You really need to toast your fennel seeds. Fennel seeds are, if you try one, if you're cooking along with me, put a couple in your mouth and just chew on them. They have sort of a licorice sort of taste. And when you go to an Indian restaurant, sometimes they give them to you before you eat. Sometimes they give them to you at the end of your meal, like you would get a mint, because they help aid in digestion. They decrease gas and bloating. They actually help with bad breath. You know, in India, they use a lot of spices, not just to flavor food, but to heal, because there's a lot of healing properties to that. So what I want to do is I want the oils to get released, so I'm going to do what I call toasting. Toasting spices can be really nice. It's like toasting bread. toasted bread tastes really different than plain bread. So we're going to put this on the stove and we're going to toast these. It happens really, really fast and you have to keep moving them around. So, okay. And put that right over there. And you'll see they'll start to pop a little bit. And Nelson can attest to this. I have burnt these many times. Because if you walk away from the stove and you forget they're on there, and you'll see them start to turn, you'll see in the camera, you'll see them start to turn a little bit brown, and you'll smell them. Yeah. So while we're doing that, well, I'm afraid to walk away for fear I'm going to burn them. While we're doing that, I want to talk about cutting up an onion. Keep moving it. There's different ways you can cut an onion. So I brought my Vidalia chop wizard, and I'm actually going to show you because I had some people ask questions about it. And I'm going to heat up this stove. You want to get this pan warm, the pan that you're going to saute your onion in. You want to make sure the pan gets good and hot before you put the onion in. Last week I talked about caramelizing onions. Adds a lot of flavor to the pan, but you don't need oil. So I'll turn this on. So I'm not used to cooking with gas. I have an induction burner at home, so this is kind of new to me as well. And these are toasting. Yeah, they're starting to smell nice. You know what you could do? You could toast a half a bottle and then you could store it in the bottle, so every time you have a recipe with fennel seed, you're not doing that. Fennel seeds are used in a lot of meats, like sausages, so it gives it that really sausagey flavor. So if you're making a veggie burger and you kind of want to go that path, I would recommend using toasted fennel seeds. I use them in almost every Indian dish I have. I think I don't want to go any further. You can see they're starting to get really dark. We'll stop, then I won't burn anything on our live show. So this is heating up. Wait a minute. I know, I need to get to know my stove. Okay. This is heating up. So the chop wizard, it's nice because you can chop in different sizes. This is the smaller one. I'm going to cut the onions up really small. You can't just put a whole onion in that though. It won't work. So you cut your onion up into like pieces like this. And some people might say, well, why not go ahead and cut it? If you're cutting a lot of onions, this is great because then your eyes don't, start to tear up. It's a little noisy. It's a little noisy, so here we go. I love my tools and my gadgets. It makes life so much easier. So you can see how really, really fine those are. And if I was home doing this, I would go ahead and take 3 onions and just chop them all up. It's not hard to clean. You can stick that right in the dishwasher. Move these over here. I'm going to try to make space for where I'm going next. Okay. So we're going to saute the onions, and the pan is probably not quite hot. So I want to show you how I do garlic. Garlic is super easy to mince. I have this little Tupperware. I call it my pole chopper. And Nelson discovered it the other night and said, wow, that thing is really, really effective. You can put nuts in it. You can put onions in it. You can put jalapenos in it. But we're going to put garlic. I've got 6 cloves of garlic. So in the recipe, we had a little error, and we had 6 cloves of garlic written twice. But it's really 6, not 12. But if you put 12 in, it'll just taste better.
Hey, Kim, When a recipe says 1 onion, is that typically a medium-sized
Yeah,
onion?
it's typically a medium-sized onion.
And how many cups does a medium-sized onion equate
Probably
to?
about a cup, about 1 cup. The thing about an onion is you really can't go wrong, because if you have too much onion, it's still going to make the recipe taste great. So let me show you what I have now. Looks like that. And again, I told you last week we don't add garlic until the onion is all done sautéing. Let's just check our pan. No, it's not. It's hot enough. We'll go ahead and throw our onions in there. I'm just going to saute in water. You can saute in veg broth, however you want to do it. These are going to cook pretty quickly. You can already see on the bottom of the pan it's starting to caramelize really quickly. Last week I used white wine. This week I'm just using water, which is what I use most of the time. You can see how it lifts it. And I like the onions pretty finely diced for this. If you wanted to add a jalapeno pepper at this point, it's not in the recipe, but it goes great in the recipe if you like it a little bit spicier. Just take the seeds and the ribs out. You could put a poblano pepper in here. Peppers are not as spicy as you might think. When you take the ribs out, take a spoon and completely scrape the ribs out. You'll be amazed at how mild a pepper can be. And that is probably close to being done. I'm going to put my garlic, I'm going to turn it down on low, put my garlic in there because you don't want that to burn. And then it calls for ginger paste. I think it calls for about a tablespoon. I'm just going to check to make sure I don't ginger paste. Yes, sorry, 1 tablespoon. I know about what that looks like, but when you're using a lot of spices and it's the first time, make sure you measure. And I'm going to turn the stove off now and so just let it sit. So now you're all ready to go. Now you want to make this sauce. The easiest way for me to show you to make the sauce is to just put it in a blender and emulsify all of the ingredients. So in the sauce, in the original recipe, in the cookbook, I tell people to use a 1/2 cup of raw cashews and 2 cups of water. And I tell people to blend it. So I was looking at the recipe and I was thinking about availability in grocery stores. Raw cashews are not easy to find right now. I had a bunch in my freezer. You can just use milk because cashews and water make cashew milk, 1 to 4. So if you want to make cashew milk, that's great. But today we're just going to use I'm using a soy milk. I always show people what milks I use. I just use straight soy milk. It's organic, easiest one to find. So then to that we're going to add our spices, and I put them all out here. We have the curry powder, which curry powder is just like garam masala. It's a spice blend. It's a lot of spices. It's turmeric, it's chili powder, I have to read them off because there are so many. There is coriander, cumin, cinnamon, cardamom, cayenne pepper, ginger, and it can be really spicy. Not all curries are created equal. So depending on the brand you buy, where you buy it, it can be spicier. This one I have is a little bit spicy. So if you're concerned about spice, Instead of using a whole tablespoon, maybe a half to 3/4 of a tablespoon, you can always add more, but you can't take it out. Garam masala, cumin powder, and red pepper flakes. And if you don't like heat, remove the red pepper flakes for sure. But I love the spice that this adds. And then I'm going to try to go down the ingredients so that, you know, we talk about them at the same time. Okay, curry, this is tomato paste because this is typically a tomato-y kind of gravy. And in India, they actually use fresh tomatoes and they puree them, but we're not going to go through that process. 3 tablespoons. If you open up a can of tomato paste and you have a little bit left in the bottom of the can, freeze it. Put it in. Get yourself one of these. These are great for like coconut milk. If you have leftover in the can, which we had today, you can make little coconut milk cubes and use those. You can put cubes of tomato paste. You can put cubes of ginger paste, anything you want. Those are really handy. Okay. Oops. And then we're going to add some cornstarch because that's what's going to make it thick. If you don't want to use cornstarch, you can use arrowroot powder. You could use flour. Make sure you use double the amount of flour because flour doesn't have the same thickening power as cornstarch. And then coconut milk. I'm using 1/4 cup of coconut milk. The way I use coconut milk is I want to get the flavor and I want to get that nice mouthfeel, but I don't want to use a whole can of coconut milk. That's a lot. So I put my coconut milk in the tray. I have a whole bunch of cubes at home. But you're going to use 1/4 cup. You can get light or regular, whichever works for you. And then maple syrup. And the sweetness, again, offsets all those spices. Okay, I just have to kind of clean as I go, otherwise I'll end up with a lot of stuff in front of me. So we're going to put this in the blender. And it's going to be a little bit loud because it's going to go in the blender. I'm warning people. That's it. That's all there is to it. I'm going to turn my stove back on again. I'm going to add this to the stove. I'm going to turn it at right about medium. You don't want it on high because it'll burn. You can see how thick that is. And don't forget your fennel seeds. Throw those in. Mix them around with your onion. I'm getting ahead of myself here, guys. And if I'm going too fast, slow me down. And it'll thicken as it cooks. Typically, this is a very smooth sauce, but I like to have a little bit of texture, so I like the onions. And I'm going to add peas to it. Somebody wrote in today and asked me what they could use instead of peas. And I suggested you could use edamame, you could put chopped spinach in it, you could roast cauliflower and do cauliflower, you could roast tofu. You really could put anything in this. So essentially, you're kind of done because this could be a meal all by itself. The malai, you could put tofu in it, you could put chickpeas in it, and you could have it over rice with a salad, and this is dinner. So the sauce is just amazingly easy to prepare.
Kim,
Yes.
Lori wants to know, can she grind the toasted fennel seeds? She doesn't like them whole.
You can grind, that's a great question. You can grind toasted fennel seeds. If you have a coffee grinder, you can put them in that. And yeah, you can grind a lot of whole spices. Actually, it's nicer when you grind a whole spice because it just flavors everything. If you're using a coffee grinder to do that, only use it for spices. Otherwise, your coffee is going to taste like fennel seed. So I have a coffee grinder at home just for spices. So you could certainly do that. So that's really done. And then I'm going to go back to my veggie balls. And no one caught me on this, but I forgot to add the flax. So I'm going to do that right now. You can see how goopy it is. That's going to hold, it's going to kind of hold your burgers and balls together because I'm going to make both. So just make sure you incorporate it. I do that a lot. I make a flax egg, I set it aside, and then I forget to put it in. I think that's pretty good. So when you're making veggie balls, you're going to save yourself a little bit of time if you get your hands wet, and use your hands. We wear gloves right now at the grocery store. I see people wearing gloves. You don't need to wear gloves when you're cooking. And that keeps it from sticking to your hand. And these freeze really nicely. You could, some substitutions you could make with this is if you didn't want to put peas in it, you could put spinach in it. If you want to use white beans instead of chickpeas, I would say chickpeas, and when you're making a veggie burger or a veggie ball, chickpeas are the best bean to use because they hold everything together really nicely. Let's see. This sauce smells so good. A lot of times if I make this, I don't make both. I make one or the other. So I think I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to do veggie burgers. Put the veggie burger down like that. So you can do half and half, stick the burgers in the freezer, and you're good to go. And again, this is a gluten-free meal if you're using gluten-free bread. Somebody asked me if they could use oats. You can use oats instead of bread. In my world, if you go through all the trouble of making something like this, make a lot of it, double the recipe, and then put them in the refrigerator or freezer, and you never have to buy those nasty frozen veggie burgers, because if you read the ingredients, it's pretty awful. They use isolated soy protein, some of them use egg whites, they use a lot of oil. Okay. So I got 4, I'll go back to the balls. My hands are getting kind of sticky here. And I heated my oven to about 400 degrees, but really, ovens can vary by about 35 degrees, so I'm not really sure what your oven is. But I typically go at 400 for burgers and patties and things like that. So we'll put this over here. Stick this in the oven. And you want to cook those for about 20 to 30 minutes. It really depends on your oven. And this is my done product. I wanted to have that so you weren't hanging out here waiting for my burgers to cook. Oh, this smells so good. So we're going to have this over rice tonight. So I put rice in my Instant Pot. By the way, I always tell people to try it when it's in the pot. It's really good. I didn't put any salt in it, so I'm going to put a little bit of salt in it. It's spicy. It's very spicy. Not too spicy. It's good spicy. So I put brown rice in the Instant Pot over here. I love my Instant Pot. We'll do some shows on the Instant Pot. But I had that going. I got a short grain brown rice. Oops, it's been in there a while. That's not a good. And use this. I'm going to put, how many meatballs do you want, Nelson? 2, 3?
Yes, this is my favorite part of the
Yeah,
show
this is
because
his
when
favorite
she's
part.
done, I run up there and I start eating it.
I could eat this 2 or 3 nights in a row. That's how good it is. And when you eat this in a Indian restaurant, you will not feel good. You know, every time I go to Indian restaurant and eat Indian food, I always feel full and like I've had a lot of oil. And they use a lot of hidden oils. And
Kim, Joan wants to know, how long do you cook brown rice in the Instant Pot?
I cook my brown rice for 23 minutes every time. And then I let it naturally release. I'm going to put some cilantro on here just to garnish it a little bit. And then I'm going to taste it. Cut the veggie balls. These are really nice and tender. Wow. That's really good. It's really good. That's actually, I said this 3 times. It's my favorite, one of my favorite dishes in the cookbook. And most of the recipes that we'll do on Plant Pure Kitchen Live will be brand new recipes, but every once in a while I have to go back and visit a cookbook because there's some recipes like this that are just amazing. Next week we're going to be making Thai tacos, which is a brand new recipe. I hope you will join us, and I hope you'll cook along and cook your dinner. And thank you for joining us, and I'll see you back here next week.